check, check. And they're from... Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday Bible Study. If you're tuning in from somewhere else, welcome to somewhere else. Hopefully we're streaming. Are we good? We're good. All right, I can't see it on that other end. If you're new or you're tuning in, we have a lot of people tuning into this. You can download our app, C3 Naples, and wherever that is you get your apps, you can look at the Bible study questions under media. They have symbols for things nowadays. And so you click on that symbol and it'll take you there. Click on Bible study questions and you can follow along. It's usually in there following my sermon or just right after my sermon. So you can go to lunch and talk about the Bible study questions, nerd out or not. If you want to be prepared for this, you will be. Seems like a lot of people are out today, but we have our resident fact checker, Lonnie. He'll keep me. Yeah, where is it? Where are you? Stop tuning in from somewhere else and come here if you can. Anyway, we get it if you can't. All right, so today we're going to be talking about 2 Kings chapters 2 through 4. We'll follow along with the questions. The theme here was accepting the gift. It led to the gift of salvation eventually. It's one thing to receive something or think that you've received something. It's another thing to really accept it, to really take it in. So we're going to look at that and this woman's kind of reaction to what Elisha has for her. So the question just to think about, have you ever refused a gift from someone? Have you ever refused a gift? Someone's going to give...
Dietary rejection.
Oh, ooh. That
would be yes.
You've refused it? Yeah, I've done that. I was offered a piece of cake.
Yeah, exactly.
And I refused it. Why? Because I already ate a lot for lunch today. So I decided that maybe it was not a good idea. Plus ice cream right before you got to talk for an hour or so. Get you all phlegmy and weird. It doesn't bother you, Ed. You're immune to that.
Practice.
You gotta practice. You gotta practice. Okay. Well,
Yeah. No, so I did refuse a pie one time. It's coconut cream. I'm allergic to coconut. But anyway. Yeah, I tried to promote. One of my staff was going to promote someone, and this woman very astutely said, I politely declined, right? I professionally politely declined. And so I brought her into my office and I said, why are you declining this promotion? And she said, I don't think I can succeed in the role that you've given me, right? In this new role. She was going to be, frankly, a woman leader for the Christian organization, going into a Muslim country and trying to bring change. And she said that's just a formula for disaster. And so she said, I'd rather just stay where I'm going than get killed in, name the country, right? So it was, we offered her this promotion. And she was like, when's a promotion not one, right? When it's in a Muslim country and you're a Christian and you're a woman. So, and then I went and talked to my God and said, what are you thinking? so yeah. It was probably the only time I've ever had someone say, no. Although I think about it. I've had people say no to a bonus as well. I won't keep talking. It's a long story.
We have an hour, but
You're asking me to fill time. I can tell
no. I don't need anyone to help me fill time. Quite the opposite. Okay, so I cut it off halfway through. So we're doing this whole thing not by chapter numbers. We're kind of almost forgetting the chapter numbers, verse numbers are there for reference. We're almost kind of forgetting that they're there. So I'm doing it thematically. And so what I'm doing is I'm just looking for themes over broader sections. So I'm always in the Word, just reading it. And so I'm just marking off, okay, where do we find a theme here? And so we picked up at about verse 19 of chapter 2. And so this was after Elijah's taken to heaven. They're looking for him for 3 days, even though Elisha told them don't bother. And then it just kind of, to me, like if I had to do a chapter break, that's where I'd do it, right on, verse 18. Didn't I tell you not to go? And then it just kind of, another scene. So we get like a scene with Elijah's first miracle. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm kind of forgetting about the numbers and stuff and looking at larger themes. And we're definitely seeing that. We're seeing that, wow, that's kind of interesting when you don't stop there where the number told you to stop and you keep going. Oh, there's actually like a theme. Things repeat themselves. And so that's what we're going with here. Next week, it'll be like the theme of greed, and you'll see different stories that'll have the same exact theme. And they're over chapters 5 through 8, not 8 actually. So today we'll pick up at 2:19. That's where we are, and we'll go with the questions just as a guide. All right. So what is Elisha's first miracle? When you got it.
What? I did.
So you're going to set the back
Never liked it.
so you can see.
He purified the water of a town where he was at, Jericho.
Oh, come on. Let her work it out.
Jericho. Because it says right there, 23.
Basically, you just read the Bible in order and you'd have all the answers to the question. But that's probably what I'm trying to make you guys do.
They purified the water at Jericho, or in the river of Jericho, by shooting salt on it.
Shooting salt.
Yes.
Okay, with a salt shooter. Like salt spreader, like so they have what they have in the north with the trucks go around and no, they have that's a real thing.
Know that you shoot flies with?
Yeah, that's what we thought. All right. So, and just to let you know, I can't see too well out of this eye, so I don't want to ignore you. If you want to come in, that's great. If you, good. I have a hard time there. So, the ground rules are: if you want to answer a question, you raise your hand. You can at any time.
I did read that part about the salt, but wouldn't the first miracle be when he split the Jordan?
When you went with Coke.
But I mean, the first to be fair, you started on verse 19, and that happened before that. But yeah.
So in context, yes, you would technically be correct.
Yeah.
So remember, guys, like when Elijah was taken up, the cloak was left, which was interesting because it's his mantle, right? So he folds it all up before he strikes the Jordan. They go across, but it represents like the folding of his mantle, the putting of something away, and then the representation of Elisha picking it up. He's all upset, right? So, yes. Technicality. I like the way you think, though, man. You're going to get along just fine here. Just fine. Yeah. He's like, waiting. Good one. All right. All right. What's the significance of salt in the Bible?
Well, I know that in the New Testament there's a reference to salt that Jesus makes on when he's giving. I'm pretty sure it was the Sermon on the Mountain.
Well, something, yeah. What good is salt? If salt loses its flavor, it's worthless.
From that part is Jesus is referring to the people and how. When reading this, the way I perceive it is that like it's like he's saying, him throwing the salt into the water and the water's now good. It was like God putting people on earth to give the earth value. So like it's like the people are the salt of the earth. And that.
Yeah, and Jesus' thing is saying, like, what good is salt if it loses its taste? So it's no good for, like, whatever, the food or the manure pile. He says, you just throw it away. So basically, context there is like, having salt in yourselves is like doing good deeds and loving people, being useful, right? So salt isn't useful if it doesn't have good flavor. So when we go back, salt also represents permanence. So the offerings are salted. If you go back in the law of Moses, and they're salted. Jesus makes a reference of it. I know at the end of Mark chapter 9, for example, he'll say, it's actually very hard to understand because you really have to know the law of Moses pretty well. But he's talking about, it's a weird exchange, but the disciples are basically arguing about who's greater. And so he pulls a child aside and does the illustration of a child. You have to welcome this child. You have to be like this, right? And then John interrupts him, which is really funny because, Jesus, we saw someone casting out demons in your name and doing things. And he's like, if someone gives you a cup of cold water to drink, don't refuse it. Whoever is not against us is for us, right? So he says all that. But whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble, let it be like a millstone, be tied around their neck and thrown into the water, right? And he says, you'll be salted with fire. You'll be tested. If your hand causes you to sin, chop it off. Your eye causes you to sin, throw it away. You'll be salted with fire. So he's talking about being tested because those grains often were tested. Also, you'll be purified by fire. So it's like this multi-level meaning. But they salted the offering. What he's referring to is what's in the law of Moses, when they salt the offerings with fire. If you know the story of Gideon with the Midianites, remember the guy who tests God out with the wool? So Gideon, a lot of people don't keep reading that his son is Abimelech, ends up being a really wicked guy. And he destroys a town. And when he destroys the town, he throws salt on it, meaning this is permanent. It's going to last forever. So there's often a connotation of permanence. So the water at Jericho, what it's saying is, this is good forever. That's my way of looking at it. Yeah, but it's not magic salt. So the text is telling you that. It's forever, but not magic salt. The Lord does it. Carly.
Is that how it works as well when Lot and his family are
Permanence.
escaping?
Yeah.
Okay.
His wife looks back, pillar of salt. Permanence. So it means a lot of different things, but that's one main thing. That's what it is here in this particular section. But yeah, Mark 9's complicated. A lot of people don't get it, but if you read the Old Testament a lot, it's like he's often saying several things there. Did you have something, Ed?
No, I was thinking of Carlos. And if you substituted the word salt for permanent, you almost get the same meaning, right? I mean, if this is permanent, right? Jesus, if you substitute salt for permanent, you say, well, if this is permanent, but if it loses its permanence, what value is it? Right?
So it's deep.
So it's the same. It's slightly different context with the referral, reference to the same meaning. Right? Because so a little. I'm going to say a little bit. So
It works. Jesus it's like when you really understand the word in full, a lot of times, like that's one section, he's saying a lot right there. Like there's a lot going on there. It's deep. So it's never one little thing. Jesus is coming at it from a few angles. Like every single time I read the Gospels, like another thing comes to mind. I'm like, wow, okay, oh, wow. Or I'm reading it now in light of just reading something else. I'm like, crazy. Yeah, scriptures are like that. But it's not.
That makes sense.
It's totally cool. Like, don't be careful with like total absolutes. Because it often will refer to a few. Well, think about Jericho too. What did Joshua do to Jericho? Remember? He cursed it. He cursed it. And then later on, when we get to Ahab coming on the scene, the two, now the names are eluding me, but whoever, what's that? His sons. Segub and, Segub, it's Hile is the father. So now this is going to bother me. Hold on a second. Where is it? So it's probably, I'm looking at the wrong book. That doesn't help at all. I get this. But anyway, so you want to go deep? Watch. We're going to get deep here. So I'll tell you what I was referring to. So David curses Jericho. Did you get it, Lonnie, or no? Give me one sec. It's somewhere around 1 Kings 15, 16. Omri, here we go. Ahab. Okay, here we go. So if you go to 1 Kings 16, and then you go to like the last paragraph, it's going to be verse 34. 1 Kings 16, 34. So here, we'll really go deep, make this whole thing come together. So this is when Ahab is really significant, right? Because in this section, we're looking at Joram or Jehoram, Ahab's son, in today's Bible study section, right? So when Ahab first arrives on the scene, it was during his reign that Hiel, or however you want to say it, a man from Bethel, rebuilt Jericho. When he laid its foundations, it cost him the life of his oldest son, Abiram. How did I get that wrong? And when he completed it and set up its gates, it cost him the life of his younger son, Segub. This all happened according to the message from the Lord concerning Jericho, spoken by Joshua, son of Nun. So it's a cursed town. May you never be rebuilt. And then he goes into this. It will cost, whoever sets up its gates, it'll cost him the life of his first son. This is all what Joshua said. So now you're connecting Joshua to Ahab to the text today, and Elisha permanently making the waters of Jericho pure. Crazy.
So the city was rebuilt, but the water was still cursed.
Yeah. But do you see how it all works? So if you have all this in mind, it's like, you know what I mean? You get it. It's like crazy. So.
Is Jericho a city today, like now?
I don't know.
Is it still a city?
Was it Jesus?
Well, I don't know if it's called Jericho.
Yeah, I don't know. I would be able to answer the question. I only know things about the Bible. And food. And food in Naples, Florida. Let's see. I can play guitar, do sound, and beat people up. That's it.
My father-in-law gave my wife a Bible that has like maps
Yes.
that shows the biblical city and what it is now. So these are all like real places.
I think I have a big book like that. Someone gave me. It's like an atlas of the Bible. It's huge. Yeah. I'm not like a maps guy. I don't know. It's not my thing. Okay. So you see how this all comes together?
Google says yes.
Google says yes. I don't know.
So Jericho's a see, all you don't need a big.
Does it take all the water?
Okay. So what strange encounter does Elisha have with a group of boys? Mike is Mike.
He runs into a bunch of boys who are making fun of him because he's bald and calling him baldy or something.
Different story.
And he,
Literally, that's what it says. Get out of here, baldy.
Yes.
And then he doesn't
Elijah. It's all gonna be Elisha now.
curses him, curses them.
In the name of the Lord, I think it says.
Yeah, and so is it two bears come out of the woods?
And you're answering the next question. Go ahead.
Oh,
You good? Keep going. and then what does what to how many of them?
mauls them or kills them. 42 of them.
42 of them.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now there could be more there.
Yeah, I was going to say, the question is how many were there, but there was only 42 mauled.
Someone got away.
Somebody, I don't know.
It doesn't say that. So.
But you got to think about it. Like 40, those are some pretty quick bears.
Yes.
42 is a pretty good number. He's a good daddy.
All 42 of them assumed the fetal position to try to get the bears.
They'll throw
Made
it.
it easy.
Yeah. So it's a weird account. It always it's not funny, but it makes me chuckle. I don't know why. It's a little weird.
Like, oh, we killed
We can take
bear.
care of this, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
Not
Maybe they tried to fight back.
The first time Gene was reading through the Bible in detail, he came out of the room and he was like, "You'll never believe the story." Like, I didn't even know this was in here.
Yeah,
Why did all the
And it just ends. It just stops. That's it. It's like, okay.
They got mauled by bears. Next scene.
Oh, we have so many questions.
It's like, all right, well, fine.
Okay.
The good part is
Don't
we
call
have a
it the
physical
So all people bald.
Elisha, right? So he's bald. Elijah was a hairy man, so they're different. All right. Who was Joram or Jehoram? Carolee.
Joram was the son of Ahab. Jehoram, was the son of King Jehoshaphat.
Now here's a tricky thing. Depending on what Bible study or Bible translation you're reading, they're the same. Jehoram is an alternate for Joram. It's the same name. And so both of them, so this is where it starts to get nutty confusing, because both of them have the same name. So Jehoshaphat's son and Ahab's son, one of them has the same name. Now, why was he made king? Do you know that? Trick question. Not a trick question, just an added question. So why does Jehoram or Joram become king? He's Ahab's son. Wendy.
Because Ahaziah.
Close, good enough. I'll give it to you. Ahaziah, that's fine.
Ahaziah died and didn't have any sons.
Bingo.
So then
Joram or Jehoram becomes the next king. So he's Ahab's son. So we're still connected to Ahab. Cool, right? So now we get this Jericho thing and Ahab, and it's all kind of like whoosh, coming together nicely. So who rebelled against Joram? So Joram's going to be the king of Israel in the north. Carolyn's hands, no, no.
King Mesha of Moab.
Yeah, Mesha, yep, of Moab. Of Moab. And how did he rebel? Like, over it. I don't know who picked this. Whoever wants it.
Oh, well, wasn't at one time he was giving the king of Israel 100,000 sheep?
Yeah, and then I think it's 100,000 ram skins.
So it's
No,
100,000
the lambs
lambs
themselves.
and
The
the
lambs
bulls,
and the
100,000.
The ram skins too, right?
Yeah, the lambs
And then when Ahab died, he said,
Yeah.
not doing that. That's how we rebel, not paying tribute.
Yes.
Then, you know.
Exactly. So that's what's going on in the backdrop. So let's see. Here's a good one. Why is Jehoshaphat still alive here? Caroline?
This Bible works in really, really weird ways. And
That's the best answer.
I think you could just answer like every question that way. And it would be right. Like the bears and everything. It would have covered everything.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Why is he alive? Why did
Like-
two bears maul
like-
42 boys?
in a movie, when we have to do a snap back
Yes.
to the past to
Yes.
get context of why we're here
Yes.
right now. So this is a snap back.
Yes. It's either a snapback or previously when they summarized Jehoshaphat's reign and talked about him dying, it's just a summary, right? So they're just going to, well, I'm going to summarize this, but we'll get back to him. Okay, so it gets really confusing. The problem, though, is like I attempted to do pieces of this chronologically, and it's mind-bending because you have to go sometimes to 3 different books of the Bible that aren't even close and snap in. For example, I'm working on getting close to some of the prophets now. And Jeremiah, like Isaiah, it's not really always chronological. And so you have to jump to different sections of Isaiah and then put them back into 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings in all different parts. I'm like, I am not doing that to myself or you guys. So we're going to just keep following it like it is, but I'm going to put books that run in parallel together like I have been. So when they do happen to go parallel, I'll snap it in. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to treat some prophets, like Amos, I can go through the whole thing. So we're just going all the way through Amos, and then we're done. We'll move on, right? But with prophets like Isaiah or Jeremiah, I'm going to treat them like I did the Psalms when you're talking about David and certain people, and I'll be putting like a little section of Isaiah in there because it's mind-bendingly confusing. It's really difficult. So the Bible's like that. It kind of goes in and out of time. And so Jehoshaphat appears here, although we saw he died, he's here having this interaction. So sometimes it's not chronological and it's happening. Sometimes they wrapped up something else before. So just important. A lot of people don't understand that, and they remain permanently confused. They're like, wait a minute, didn't Jehoshaphat just die? Is it a different Jehoshaphat? What's going, so if you understand how this works, it helps you out so much. You can weave in and out of time. All right. So now he has an alliance here, right, with Joram and Jehoram. What is it similar to? Wendy.
It is similar to his alliance with Ahab and his alliance with
Ahaziah. So yeah, it's very, very similar, right? So some of the same things happen. So let me just see. Okay, so I can touch on that. So some of the same things are said. with Ahab, my troops are your troops, my horses are your horses, we are as one. And so that's what he gets rebuked for, right? The Lord rebukes him for this. Like, what are you doing? Because Israel tends to be way more wicked, right? With their first king, Jeroboam, he doubles down on Aaron's sins. He makes the 2 golden calves. And so they're way more evil in the north than Judah is in the south. Judah, once in a while, have like a good, like Hezekiah will come along, Josiah. Like they'll have better righteous kings. They're not perfect, but they're better. Israel, they're just generally pretty bad. So they're not really supposed to be making these alliances, but Jehoshaphat does it 3 times now. So now's the 3rd time he does it. So first time it almost gets him killed. Second time he loses the whole fleet of trading ships with Ahaziah. Now he's going to go join with him again. So who else joins Judah and Israel? Carolee. Yes. So this is interesting, right? 3, what would I say, like, let's just call them countries, but people groups really who have been enemies. You know where Edom comes from?
Yeah, Esau.
Oh man, I didn't even see a hint. It was just like, it's getting crazy here. Soon we're going to be throwing bottles, like, you're going to be switchblades, knives, like, look, calm down.
I noticed you don't have any pew Bibles we can throw.
It's not a pew. So Esau.
Yeah.
Jacob and Esau. Esau, he becomes the father of the Edomites. Jacob becomes Israel, the father of the Israelites. Jacob and Esau, right? So very interesting. So you have this alliance, like they really shouldn't be together, but they are. Mike, did you have something?
Well, when you brought that up, and I was thinking, is Moab, are they Lot's and his 2 daughters? That's their gig?
Yes. So from so everyone, we talked about the pillar of salt, right? So after that happens, they go to this little town called Zoar. It literally means little place. And so they go there, but Lot doesn't like the people there or whatever. So they go into a cave, and he has his 2 daughters are left. But the 2 daughters are like, let's make sure we can continue our line. So they get their dad drunk and sleep with him. And so I believe the oldest sister becomes the mother of the Moabites, and the younger sister becomes the mother of the Ammonites, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe it's this. So exactly, they're detestable people as well. So that's what makes Ruth so incredibly significant, is because Ruth is a Moabite. So, it speaks of not only redemption, but the redemption of a people group, the redemption of a woman, then pointing to redemption in Christ, because she is David's great-grandmother. I always mess that up. So David's great-grandmother. That's why it's right before 1 Samuel. That's its position there, just to point. It gives us the lineage and point to David. It's amazing. So yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and you guys are really digging in, right? And so over the last year or so, a lot of light bulbs are going off, right? It's like, wow, this stuff really all amazingly connects. Hey, it's God's word. All right? So what ends up happening to them, these 3 armies together? They have Edom, Israel, Ed.
They run out of water for their livestock.
They run out of water. That's a problem when you run a military campaign. Running out of water is never really a good thing. So who suggests getting Elisha and why?
One of King Joram's?
Like officials?
Yeah.
Or some might say
Officer.
officer.
Yes, because he used to be Elijah's personal assistant. That was
He tells him he used to be. So basically, again, it's like the encounter with Ahab and Micaiah. So, remember they had the 400 prophets, left over, the 450 prophets of Asherah left over. They killed the prophets of Baal, but not the Asherah ones. And so Jehoshaphat is with Ahab. He knows Israel's illegitimate. And so, isn't there a prophet of the Lord here? There should be a prophet of the Lord here. There's one, but he never says anything good about me, Ahab says, and they get Micaiah, right? So it's just like that. Jehoshaphat's like, isn't there a prophet of the Lord here? And one of the officers is like, yes, Elijah's assistant is here. So he's like, good, get him. So it's just like that account too. It just keeps repeating itself. So who is Elisha hostile to and why?
To the other 2 kings. Besides Joseph. The other
Joram. Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's from Israel, right? It's like, why do you bother talking to me, basically, is what he's saying.
I'm cool with Joseph.
Yeah, Jehoshaphat, right? So it's because of him. Right? So it goes back to what I'm saying about the kings of Judah being more. So just, we did it before, but just in case. So here's the thing. Remember when they split? It was like, a lot of times the Bible just, how do I say this right? Like it mentioned, it's like the Gospels. Like one Gospel will mention one detail, but the other won't mention it. Doesn't mean it's contradicting. It's just, they happen to point that out, right? Like Luke might come along and be like, oh, by the way, that. So this happens too. So they'll say things like almost hyperbolically, like, and then it was just the tribe of Judah that, went down in the south, and all the other 10 tribes went to the north with Israel. But then, in a sentence later, it'll say, and also they had this many soldiers from Benjamin, that tribe. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the Levites went down with them too, and there were people from Simeon leaving there. All right, so Benjamin is often associated with them, and Levi, because the capital city in Judah is Jerusalem. That's where the temple is, right? So they're not supposed to do the worship or the sacrificing or anything like that outside of there. So if the Levites are to do that, they need to go live in Judah. So that's why the Levites are there. Also, so you have a real worship, let's say legitimate worship and legitimate prophecy there naturally, right? Because the Lord's with you in that city. They're building all these false things in Israel and doing false sacrifices. And Jeroboam, in the beginning, his reasoning was stated, if I don't build another temple or place of worship here in Samaria, the people will leave me, and they'll go down to Jerusalem to worship, and I'll lose my population. So he doesn't want them going there. So the thinking here, so it goes all the way back to that. So the worship, the prophecy, everything is more legit in Judah, and for those kings, and et cetera, et cetera. So we went over why Elisha even agrees to it. What instrument is used and why? Mike?
He calls for a harp.
Yep.
I don't.
It doesn't say. So we can speculate, or we can just leave it alone. So if you wanted to speculate, probably it's not a magic harp. Probably because he's drowning out some noise, right? So he wants to put his earbuds in and just focus on, prophesying. So it's kind of a little bit of a trick question. All right, so what does Elisha say will happen? Yes?
Flooded with water. The valley's going to be flooded with water.
Yes.
But then it's very interesting because that seems like a blessing. Like, oh, yeah, we needed water. But then he goes on to say, like, oh, and you guys are also going to, you're also going to conquer, Moab or whatever. And then he says, but you're also going to destroy everything in your path.
You're going to cut down the trees, you're going to stop up the springs, and you're going to put rocks on all the good fields, right? So this is a small thing for the Lord, making all this water like nothing, right? So, all right. So when does the prophecy come true?
The next morning they wake up and there's not been any rain or wind or anything, but yet the whole valley just covered with water.
Pools of water appear. Now, what do the Moabites think it is? Like
Blood.
blood. Why?
They think that the three. Oh,
Go ahead, keep going.
well, I think it's because these three tribes, Judah, Israel, and Edom, were enemies, and so the Moabites thought they killed each other.
Yes, they must have all killed each other. And it's really because what? The sun is shining on it a certain way and makes it look like, reddish. Happens in Florida all the time. So let's see. How many men did the king of Moab try to break through with? Carolee?
700.
700, right? So he's trying to break through. I think it was Edom's lines. Cut through and get out of there. But what detestable thing did the king of Moab do? Ed? Sorry, Carolee, I think Ed got it.
He offered his firstborn as a burnt offering.
Yeah. It says his oldest son, who would have been king. So you wonder, what came through my mind every time I read it was, I'm not picturing actually an infant. You know what I mean? I'm not picturing. Because if it was what is the text saying? What are you reading from, Ed?
Right, it's just,
What do you got, ESV?
it's the, LES, Septuagint.
Oh, perfect. What does it say it is his oldest son?
It says, he took his firstborn son who reigned in place of him. He offered him as a whole burnt offering on the wall. Great regret came upon Israel, and they departed from him and returned to the land.
So it is saying that basically it's like a backwards way of saying like he would have been king.
Yeah.
That's what Greek is really tough. But so yeah, he would have been king. But whenever I read the text, I never picture like a little baby. I picture like maybe a boy or something. Yeah, like anything like that. Crazy.
Like Isaac.
Yeah, like that. Exactly. A really good. Yeah, good.
Well, think about it. Yeah, think about it in the context. So they're in the middle of a battle, right? So why would they have brought a child?
That
In
too.
the context of a battle, it's probably someone who was old enough to at least be an armor bearer or have some role
Really good
in this
point.
whole thing, right? So he had to be
Yes.
14, 15 or more to have had some role there.
That's a great
That
point.
makes sense.
So
Yeah. So I always had that in my mind, which is just it's horrible. And that's I stopped the message for a second to make the point again. These are like some people will say like first of all I had to stop myself because I almost said a name of a very popular guy who's doing this, and I just don't like to do that. So I was like, okay, and now we'll continue. But anyway, there are a lot of people right now like people don't take the time to do this. They just don't, and they don't do it on Sundays. It's you know what I mean. It's like we're gonna get to so many. I was laughing to Heather because we're gonna get to some accounts that like. I'm like, you've been in church for like over a decade now. Like, have you ever heard this story? She's like, nope. And there's a lot they don't cover. And a very, very, very popular thing people are saying is we got to get rid of the Old Testament. We got to throw that out and just concentrate on the gospel, Jesus stories, and all the friendly stuff, and we'll get more people in the church. That's how we'll do it. Or I don't know how many ways that's horrible heresy and sin. It's just, it's horrible. The other thing, we've discussed this, you haven't been here, but you can think about it. 30%-ish, about a third of the New Testament is either Old Testament quotation or paraphrase. So you can't be a New Testament Christian. If you're reading the New Testament, you're reading the Old Testament. And the New Testament was written and quoted that much with the idea, the authors expected you to know the full context of what they're quoting. They expect you to know these stories. So as we're going through, I'm always connecting everything back to the New Testament and the references, and people are just going, whoa, but that's kind of sad because the author expected you to know that. And that's why he's referencing it. There's always kind of like it's almost like a double entendre going on, right? It's all over the place. And so it's a really bad idea here to do that kind of thing, to just throw away. Why was I saying all that? Well, because people will say like, well, there's the God of the Old Testament and he's really different from the God of the New. Well, here's the thing. You didn't read Revelation. Because they sound pretty darn similar, when you read Revelation. He's doing the same stuff. He's wiping a lot of people out for their sin, and Jesus is judging. It's because you're in the Gospels, and Jesus, I explained this, I think, on Sunday. He did both. A lot of people just stop at John 3 and be like, see, Jesus isn't here to judge, he's here to save. No, he was there then 2,000 years ago in the flesh to save, to die for us. But he keeps saying, I'm coming back to judge everyone. And Peter and Paul clarify, Christians first. We're going to be judged. So they want to throw all that away. What they don't understand is Jesus told us he's going to come back and judge everybody. And he says all kinds of mean things about, the sheep and the goats going to hell and separate. So you just can't do it. And so we as Christians should not be apologizing for God. But here's what I will say. God's just. Think about this Moabite killing his son. You know what I mean? That's crazy. The Israelites will engage in this. The prophets say over and over again, you're killing your own children. I would never tell you to do something so horrible. But the Israelites end up doing it. They do it. Furthermore, a lot of people don't know this. The Israelites will not only kill their own children, they'll kill their children and each other and eat them. They end up resorting to cannibalism. Eating afterbirth. It says a woman will hide her afterbirth from the family so she can eat that too. These are disgusting people. Now, there is no good person. Jesus is the only good person, right? So we got to look inward too. But, don't get this idea that God is enacting all these punishments on people who are like absolutely perfect and have done nothing wrong. So I stopped here to say, this is horrible. Like, this is detestable stuff. This guy kills his oldest son. Like, what? Kill yourself. You know what I mean? Like, this is crazy. No honor in that. And so just understand the other side of it here. It's not a bunch of people like, oh, we're all perfect. No. Like,
and that's Something I've come across with non-believers who ask me, well, how can there be a God when all of this bad stuff is going on in the world? And I find it difficult sometimes to explain, but in my own mind, I think that, well, we all deserve death,
That's the broad answer. An unbeliever's not going to understand that. Like that's the broad answer. We know that we are not good people inherently. We need the Holy Spirit to operate well.
Explain that to a non-believer.
So very simply,
You got it. Yeah, it's really funny. My daughter asked me this question this weekend, and 20 years ago, I had done a seminar for guys on the very topic. And of all the reading I did, it came down to really 4 things. Why do bad things happen in the world, right?
Yep.
Why do bad things happen? First of all, we live in a fallen world. We're all sinners, right? We are all sinners. And when you put a bunch of 3.5 billion sinners together, bad things are going to happen.
It's like going to college.
Yeah. So we live in a fallen world. The second thing is that Satan roams the world looking for someone to devour. Right? So there are times when Satan intervenes in our lives, and we have to withstand it. Story of Job, right? The third thing is God tests us. We go through trials as believers. And then the fourth thing is we do stupid stuff as people. We do stupid stuff. And I reminded my daughter, I said, remember it was snowing, we like a foot of snow outside, and I'm looking for the kids, and I look outside, and they're all running around with no shoes and socks on, and playing in the snow. And then they all are like, Dad, how'd you let this happen? Our feet are horrible, we're freezing. And I said, I didn't let it happen. You all ran outside knowing it's 8 degrees and 2 feet of snow. You did it to yourself, right? So don't blame your father. Blame yourselves, right? Take some responsibility. So those are typically the 4 things that cause bad things to happen.
Now, how did your daughter receive that?
And she said, Dad, you're right. And she said, from a Christian worldview, she says, you're right. I understand that we live in a fallen world. And that's easy to accept, right? Because every day there's a storm, there's something. We live in a fallen world. And she said, I can accept that, Dad. She goes, the Satan thing, if you're not a believer, it's hard to believe that Satan's roaming around looking for people to consume. And I said, but read your scripture, because it affirms that there is a Satan, and he does what he says about himself. I roam around the earth looking for someone to destroy.
Yeah,
right?
Joe, that's it.
Yeah.
I've been patrolling the earth.
Yeah.
What are you up to?
Satan,
Patrolling the earth.
There's trials that we see in the Bible and experience in the Bible that we experience as believers, just a test of our faith, right?
Yes.
And I said, there's no doubt we all do stupid stuff, right?
Well, see, so I would add to that.
Just one thing for a non-believer. What I've seen work is people, and we've all heard it, right? Like, well, he's a good person. It makes me chuckle every time. So I say, okay, would you consider yourself, you can use this, it usually works. Would you consider yourself a good person generally or a bad person generally? And they'll always say a good person, right? Nobody's like, I'm just a really bad person, Like sometimes they do, and that's a whole other thing. Then those are the easy people to convert. Those are the easy, good, you got this right, like sit down, right? So I'm a good person, that person's delusional, right? So they don't know what they're talking about. So how do you get them to see that? Just really simple things. And I boiled it down to you ever steal anything? A lot of people say no. And so if they say no, you can say either you're a liar now, or you really haven't stolen anything, maybe. So if you're not a liar, have you ever picked up $1 off the floor and put it in your pocket? You're a thief. What if you dropped your phone on the floor? Would you expect someone to just pick it up and put it in their pocket? No. You look for the owner or leave it there because maybe the person will go, oh, I think I dropped my $1. Let me retrace my steps, right? You're a thief. And then so you can go through all these other things. Now, what's lust? You know what I mean? Is that does your spouse know that you look at all the women that you do? I mean, now they're not a Christian. Jesus says it's adultery, right? hyperbole in there, and they probably won't understand that. But at the same time, are you married? Are you able to tell your spouse that you're checking out every single one of those women that you are? Well, now you're very dishonest. And Jesus says you're an adulterer. So, you break down simple things. But the stealing thing, I've never had anyone beat that. I've never had anyone refute that. They're like, yeah. Got you. You know what I mean? Got you. Because you don't think about that. But they'll say, oh, come on. They dropped it. It was there. Someone else is going to take it. Someone else is going to take it too? Whoa. You know what I mean? Someone else is going to rob the jewelry store. So let's go do that now. It's not logical. Lonnie.
So when I find money, I tithe on it so that you're...
The church wait, so you make us all thieves. You make the whole
Church a thief. Lonnie. That's funny. You just leave it there. Or what would you do with the phone or something else? Right? You find the closest place to say, hey, I found this on the floor. If someone comes by looking for it, give it to them, And if they steal it, it's on them. All right. All right, so let's get through some more of the questions here. We might not finish, but that's okay. So I'll probably just burn through something. So what's the widow's problem? So there's a widow that addresses Elisha. Mike.
Her husband died.
Yep.
And they were coming after her 2 sons to enslave them because of the debt she owed.
Okay, so what does she have in the house?
I'm just going to, Carolee.
A jar of oil.
Yeah, or a flask, something. Depends on which translation, right? So that's good enough. So let's see.
What is she instructed to do?
Carolee?
Go and borrow empty containers from everyone, from all your neighbors. Don't just get a few, get many. Then go back to your house and shut the door behind you and your sons and pour oil into all of the containers. Set the full ones to the side.
Yes. And so they just keep filling up.
She asks her sons, get me another container. And they're like, we don't have any more. So they just all miraculously filled from this one little. So it's another food, wine, multiplication, Jesus at Cana, a multiplication miracle. I would call it a preview or prefigure of what happens in Christ.
Elijah have one too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Yes.
say when he went to the woman's house and she only
The widow
had,
at Zarephath, yeah.
yeah, the flour and the oil.
Yeah, and it just keeps
making.
multiplying, and they have food for days, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
I was telling Heather today, when it's preparing for these, especially doing larger sections, it's mind-bending because this next part, they'll have whole sections where only one person's named, and it'll say the king of Aram or the king of Israel, and you have to know that's Ben-Hadad, that's Joram. Did it change? Did they die? But all the stories start to blend into one another because they're very, very similar. And so you have to find details. So I'm saying, and they found the jars. They say, you try to remember those. A tip to remember them, you have to sometimes remember very specific details that make one different from the other. Otherwise, they just go and they just converge, and you're like, I don't know. It's difficult. Preparing for these things is like, wah. And that's the noise I make when I get frustrated. So, nah. So what does what does the Shunammite woman do for Elisha?
Yes. Go ahead, sorry.
She provides him a furnished room. She furnishes a upper room.
Yep, on the roof of her house.
So you got to think if you look still in the Middle East today, you'll see a house. They'll have flat roofs on the buildings, and then there'll be this little shed of a room on top of the house. You also the Bible even talks about people sleeping on the roof. This happened with Samuel and Saul. They hung out on the roof because it would be nice and cool up there, right? There'd be a breeze up there. It'd be cool. So you do a lot of things on the roof. And it was like an IKEA house, right? So it had a lamp, a table, a lampstand, a table, and a chair, like a bed. So, yeah, IKEA. All right. So what is Elisha's servant or assistant's name? Lonnie. Gehazi. And you smile every time I mention it because you know what's coming, my friend. Yes, you do. All right. Sunday's going to be fun. We're going to learn that you're all greedy. So what does he tell Elisha about her?
That she has no sons and that her husband is very, very old.
Yes, her husband's old. So,
I kind of just jumped a little bit. So Elisha says, this time next year, you're going to be holding a son in your arms, right? So how does the woman respond to this gift? Ed?
She says, no, my Lord, do not deceive your servant.
Don't deceive me. Don't get my hopes up, some versions say. Don't get my hopes up. And so that's where we went with some of the application, right? Like, don't get my hopes up. You don't feel that you're worthy
To accept and receive this thing. So what happens to the...
Give me that's a son, right?
A gift, the son.
He goes out in the field with his father and gets a headache, so the servant takes him home and she's holding him and he dies.
Yes, he ends up dying. So what does the woman then do?
Go ahead, Mike.
Gets the donkey ready and takes off to go find Elijah.
Yeah, so it's a
Really interesting exchange because it's very confusing. She's sending for the husband, like a message to the husband, like, get me a donkey and a servant. Is everything okay? Yeah, I'm going to go see the prophet type of thing, but why? It's not a Sabbath. What do you got to go see the man of God for, right? Everything's fine, right? So she goes in haste, right? And then she runs into Gehazi because they're on Mount Carmel. Elisha and Gehazi see her, and Elisha kind of sends Gehazi out. Well, find out what she wants, what's going on. So what does she end up saying to Gehazi?
It's fine.
everything's fine. But it's not.
Right? The son dies. So she gets to Elisha, and then what happens?
She wants to see Elisha and pushes her way through. And he says to Gehazi, leave her alone because she's deeply troubled, but the Lord hasn't revealed it.
Hasn't told me why.
Yeah, but slightly before that, Lonnie, she says, did I ask you for a son? Right,
Bingo.
to my master.
Bingo. She repeats that.
Yeah.
Did I ask you for a son? Well, why did you do this to me, kind of thing, right? So she repeats that. So that was
Twice. So she at first has a problem with the receipt of this gift. But here's the thing. She knew that he was responsible for it, like either as a conduit to the Lord or whatever. Like he got it done, right? So she's not into Gehazi. So perhaps she has some pretty good discernment, right? Because she's going to know Gehazi's character. But she definitely knows that Elisha was the source of this, or the Lord is, but through Elisha. So I'm going to go to him. I'm not going to ask this. And so she falls at his feet, is what it says. And Gehazi tries to get off, that kind of thing. Then what Lonnie said. So what is Gehazi instructed to do, and what happens? Mike.
He's supposed to hurry ahead and put a wand or something, staff on his head. But it doesn't work.
But it doesn't work.
He heads back and meets him on the way.
Basically, yes. And so
What does Elisha do, and what happens?
Yes, go ahead.
He goes to that upper room where she had placed him and does that weird thing about laying on top of him, mouth to mouth and eye to eye, is what I remember. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. Then he gets up and paces once. And does it again.
Yes.
But I think after the first time, I think it said he felt the body getting warm again or something. So then I think after the second time, he sneezed 7 times.
7 times. And comes to life.
Yeah.
So that's very similar to what Elijah's already done for the widow at Zarephath, right? So it's really, really similar. Different sequence, but very, very similar. It's just said in other cultures, like it was just something they did. They just believed that you could transfer your spirit through that, touching parts like that. So surprise them, they just did it that time. So what are 2 other miracles performed by Elisha in this section? So I got to be careful. Carlos is here now. He's like, well, if we read the rest of the Bible, we were going to run out of time. So 2 more in this section. Yes.
All right. One, he cures or fixes this pot of stew that has the poisonous herbs in it.
Gourds.
Or gourds.
Yeah, it's like a pocket full of gourds.
Yep, and there's death in the pot. He says, all right, sorts it out.
It's good people. What does he use?
Let's see. Let's see, where's the shot? take flour and throw it in the kettle.
Yes.
And give it to the people and let them eat. And then the second thing is he starts with 20 barley bread loaves and ends up feeding 100 people.
He's 100 people. And so,
So this is similar to, in the Gospels, probably a prefigure of what? Yeah.
5,000 and 4,000, right? So you're going to have Mark 6 and then Mark 8, for example. So that's where
I landed over there on that side of it. Why, like Gehazi, couldn't the disciples heal the boy? So if we go to Mark 9, so what I did for you guys is I showed you how things connected. So we went to Mark 8, the feeding of the 4,000. If you keep reading, the Pharisees want a sign. You're not going to see a sign. The disciples get in the boat, forget to take the bread. And then he's like, beware the leaven of the Pharisees. And he's like, he does the math quiz. He's like, when I fed the 5,000, how many leftover baskets were there? 12, they said. When I fed the 4,000, how many leftover baskets were there? 7, they said, right? So it keeps going. You have Peter confessing Jesus as the Messiah. Who do they say I am? One of the prophets, like Jeremiah, Elijah, John the Baptist returned, right? Because he's been beheaded prior to that. They keep going, and basically the whole get behind me, Satan thing, because he's predicting his sufferings. And then what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his life? If we keep reading, you get the transfiguration. I did that in Mark 9 the week before. If we keep reading, we get the healing of the demon-possessed boy. But it's very interesting because the crowd is arguing. And what are you arguing about? Like he doesn't know, right? And they're like, well, your disciples tried to heal my son, but they couldn't do it. He goes, oh, you unbelieving generation, how long will I put up with you? How long will I be with you? And so the exchange kind of goes, he describes the condition, throws him into water or fire, this, that, and the other thing. Help me if you can. Jesus says, if I can? Anything's possible for someone who believes. I do believe, but help me in my unbelief, the guy says. And so he heals him. Afterwards, the disciples say, why couldn't we heal him, Jesus? He says, this kind can only come out with prayer. Some versions say fasting. But if you go to Matthew 17, the parallel account, it says, you don't have enough faith. So we'll see, remember that for next week's lesson. Gehazi is not a faithful person. That's going to be big for you guys to remember. Gehazi is not faithful. He's greedy. And so the theme is greed, because you'll see this theme, Hazael killing Ben-Hadad, the greed of taking over the kingdom. It all kind of comes full circle. So that's where I went, because it's just, I hope you guys are seeing like everything connects. Everything is in specific thematic orders. So you have the belief there, like the disciples are in the boat right after the feeding of the 4,000. Lack of belief, lack of belief, lack of belief. Finally, boom, we have to get halfway through chapter 9. You don't have enough faith. So the chapter numbers mess us up, because that's really like the feeding of the 4,000 to that healing is like one section with the theme of belief. And then it moves on to what you were talking about earlier, to the salt and fire stuff. So they're in these blocks of these themes if you're looking at it correctly. And it's all meant to be actually heard in very like one sitting. So Matthew, if you listen to Matthew, it'll take you about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Mark, just under 2 hours. It's like a movie. And so when you do it, though, you're like, oh. And it's like you just keep hearing these themes happening again and again. You see the stories connect really well. But here we see that these things not only connect, but they point to Jesus constantly. So that's a beautiful thing, and I hope you guys are. I see a lot of light bulbs going off. We've been at this series for a little over a year, and it's just a lot of people are growing, and that's a really good thing. Even me having to prepare it. It's one thing to like have it in your head, but to have it come out of your mouth and explain it to people, you have to know it better. And so it's helping me, and I'm watching you guys grow. It's great. So we got 3 minutes. Any thoughts? Carly.
You had us read James, Peter, and John, and in those it's talking about like you can ask for wisdom, but you have to make sure that I was trying to find it before you asked that, but you have to make sure that you're in the right space for it, that you're doing it in a righteous way and not a worldly way. And that was for wisdom, but multiple different things. Is that kind of the same example with, like, you didn't have enough faith to heal them, because if you're in that real, all the way there, righteous place, then that's when you have, is that when your maximum faith is gained? Is that, I don't know if that even makes sense.
Like you have something on this?
Well, to go on that, because I've thought about this too, about when you ask for wisdom, I think it falls in places, you may get it, you may even think it, but sometimes you just reject it or you don't accept it as that. You know, you start arguing with yourself, going, well, yeah, that makes sense, but what about?
But what about?
You know, and you suddenly find yourself ignoring the wisdom maybe God gave you and doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, sometimes you
Because
take
you
it
come-
out, yeah, like, well, here's the wisdom, but that's not what I wanted to hear. I kind of want this.
That's not what I want. I want wisdom, but I want wisdom this way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
I want to make this choice.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that interfere with our faith walk, and we're just honestly the key is just submission and surrender, and getting rid of that. But I want, and that's not what I want. It's just like,
Well, and
not
the
your
other-
will, not my will, Lord, but yours. Is what Jesus said. You know, so
And did you mention, I can't remember, it's maybe a couple weeks ago, about sometimes God talks in a whisper.
yes, yeah.
And, you know, I think right now I'm going through where I'm really trying to listen for those whispers. And I'm finding, you know, you got to keep all the noise, other noise away. That this world is so noisy.
Yes.
And it's like, oh my gosh, I just want quiet.
I just listen to the word a lot. Like that's a big key. So that was the thing too, is we're listening to challenge the Bible study group and people like, you know, I text
Devos to just, a lot of people, I got to close in a sec, but a lot of people will listen. I believe the local sermon is good in your local church because I'm praying for you guys all week, and then the things that come out of my mouth, even within the text, I always start with God's word, but then from the text, God tells me where to go, you know, and he's telling me what my people need to hear. So, you know, I will come up with a theme, you know, greed maybe, I don't know, but, you know, it's natural there, but then I'll always have other things in the message that people needed to hear, right? So every church where the pastor is praying, you should listen to that local message. Outside of that, just be in the Word. Just be in the Word. A lot of people go and they listen to like other churches' sermons and stuff, and it's like, okay, but I think it would be better if you already heard a sermon that week, then just listen to the Word. And so you get like the YouVersion app, and you just turn it on, you hit play. I did that last week, right? Showed you how you can make it like a Southerner, and you can make... So it was probably a little distasteful, but whatever. So, you know, but you can just listen to it. And so whenever I'm not doing something that requires a lot of concentration, I'm always listening to the Word. I'm in the Word. And so I challenge the group, listen to James, 1st and 2nd Peter, and 1 John. And listen to it through the YouVersion app. Like NLT is pretty good. And just listen to it 7 times, all those books, before listening to any other sermons. Then go back and listen to some of the people you were listening to and see if it matches at all. And you're going to see the Word of God doesn't read like most people preach. It should be very convicting. It should be very convicting, but it'll settle out a lot of things because there's so much heresy out there, you know, whether it be prosperity gospel, fake stuff. It's like, go ahead, listen to James through 1 John. You don't hear any of that there. James, you're telling me you're listening to James. That's just a stunning rebuke. It's just like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Also, though, they're not like Paul's letters. Paul's letters are to specific people with specific circumstances. So it's all the Word of God. It's all true, but it's true in contexts, you know, in certain situations. Those letters, James through 1 John, they're what are called Catholic epistles, meaning universal, not meaning, it's funny when Theodorus here, Greek speaking. No, it just means universal. It's to anybody, any church. And so those are the ones you can listen to, and you can kind of take that at face value. And it's just stunning, and I listened to it. And so I didn't start like super churched with like typical preaching. I also, you know, I didn't start one end or the other, no matter where it is, right? No names, don't name names. So I didn't have any preconceived notions. I only had biblical notions. And so whenever I first started listening to people, I was like, that's not what it says. You know what I mean? So it was easier for me to parse things out. Sometimes it's harder for church people. If you've grown up in a denomination for a long time, you are already reading that denomination stuff into the text. But when you look carefully, sometimes it's not there. And you're like, oh, and so it's a good exercise to do James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, and 1 John. And it erases a lot of bad teaching because this is right. This is right. There's no, yeah, but this other guy said, never. This is always right. Always, but in context. So good lesson. I'm glad you guys are doing it. It's just a great exercise, and it straightens out a lot of bad theology because this is good theology. And those letters apply to everyone all times, you know. So let me pray for you guys. I'm going to close out the live stream. Lord, thank you for this time. I thank you for this church and the willingness of everyone to come in and be here. I pray for those who couldn't be here. I pray that they're healthy and well. Whatever they're going through, Lord, keep them safe. Heal them up. Get them to a condition where they can come back in. Let everyone know that you love them. We know you speak in a whisper, so I pray that you open our ears so that we can hear those whispers. And we can hear your will. We can hear your love for us. So I pray that more and more people would dig into your word. They would listen to people less and to you more as an overall theme. So when they can't shut out the noise, I pray that they dig into your word, they turn your word on and listen to that because it's always true and it's always perfect, unlike people. And so, Lord, be with me this week. I'm just a person as I prepare the message. Guide me, Lord. Be with everyone this week as they go out as vessels and vehicles of your love, grace, and mercy. Let us reflect that in all ways. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.